Hello TCG and Lorcana enthusiasts, and welcome back to yet another Disney Lorcana deck profile. Once more, just so you know, these decks are the decks I take to Mario's Luxury Lorcana Locals that he holds on his Twitch channel every Monday. It is free with full proxies allowed. So if you want to try out the game, try out any of the decks, just give the game an entire try and see what your thoughts are. This is a great time to do it. So the deck I took to the locals was Stitch, Snowball, Amber, Amethyst. Again, you guys hit the 10 like goal on that video. So, of course, I had to bring it back again. Now, I did update the deck to what was the updated deck in that video. So this deck is not the same. So I'll give my thoughts on this deck and whether or not it's better to play the other version of the deck I discussed. And my overall thoughts about the night as a whole. So I only went 1-2, but the problem was I met my most unfavorable matchups in all three games. A Ruby deck and two Steel decks. First up was Steel Amber. The second was Ruby Amethyst. And the last one was Steel Amber. So I met my most unfavorable matchups all through the night. I am good with Amethyst, I am good with Sapphire, I am good with Emerald, I am good with the other colors. The two colors that this deck will struggle with and will just lose all its gas with is Steel and Amethyst. So let's go through the deck profile. We got the 4 Hey, we got the 4 Lilo, we got the 4 Stitch, we got the 4 Maleficent, the 4 Pascal, the 4 LeFou, the 4 Simba, the 4 Broom, 2 Ariel, because we do have play quite a lot of songs in here. The 4 Maleficent, 2 Rapunzel, 4 Mickey, 4 Stitch Rockstar, 4 Be Our Guest, 4, of course, Friends on the Outside, and 4 Lanterns. Now, in the other deck profile, I did make mention about using a part of your world, and I highly recommend, now thinking about it, maybe that wasn't a bad idea putting in the deck. Because the problem with Ruby and with Steel is that you're going to lose these 6 Rockstars, and the only way to cycle them back in the deck to get them is Magic Brooms. But if the Magic Brooms don't die in combat and don't get cycled back into your hand with Mickey, then you're out of luck. So I think part of your world has to be in this deck. It has to, so you can constantly make sure you're getting back your Stitch Rockstar, so you always have your Stitch Rockstar. Now, I also think maybe bumping the Rapunzel up to 3 is not a bad idea as well. And maybe keeping the Ariel so you can sing part of your world for free. Just so you don't have to pay for it. Maybe knocking down like Be Our Guest or something. But the deck core is almost very tight. And I like to say the inspiration for like the LeFous and like the Ariels and Rapunzels and this deck build is off of Mario from Super Lorcana World, his version of this deck. We kind of joked on Twitch one day that, you know, this deck has kind of been figured out. The core for Stitch has kind of been figured out, and I think the core for Amethyst is well figured out. It's just a few cards you can change in, like part of your world being one of those choices. Maybe like Jafar, heck, maybe even just putting in the Cauldron so you can cycle the cards that you want to see. Stuff like that. The little things that you may or may not want to try in the deck. So overall, this deck is fun. When this deck goes off, you will be spamming guys left and right, and you're just going to overwhelm your opponent, and you're going to win the game with all the lore. Because if you're playing a deck that is not Steel and not Ruby, there's very little ability to basically board control. What Steel and Ruby have is board control. Ruby has a ton worth of cards that can board control, and Steel just has board wipe the weenies away. Grab Your Swords deals 2 damage. Hey, if you look at that, all the little weenies are to will, which means they're going to die to Grab Your Sword. And not mentioning if you combine that Grab Your Sword with a big tank, which does 1 damage to everything on the board, in essence, your opponent is doing to you 3 whole damage a turn. Ruby has, of course, the ability to Dragonfire you, Be Prepared you. They have the Aladdin, which can swing over your guys, take damage, and start stealing your lore, because your guys are weenies, so they're not really going to hurt it. So, I mean, that's not really great, and especially because if you play into that Aladdin with the Stitch Rockstar where you're trying to exert everything so you can draw, you're just giving that Aladdin fuel to run into you. Now, it's not impossible to win those matchups. They're unfavorable. They're not impossible. You just have to outspam your opponent before they see the cards, before they see Grab Your Sword, before they see the big tink. Now, one thing you're going to find pretty often if you see Amber Steel is that they're playing this aerial, and this aerial sings for 5. That sings grab your swords for free. So, yeah, not very fun when you have to see this. I did have gameplay where my opponent was on the Amber Steel, and he had this out twice and just sang grab your swords off it for free and knocked out my entire board. Once your board is knocked out, if you go wide, you're going to find that you're just out of gas. Your hand's going to be so small, you don't have enough gas in your hand to do anything. And it's over. Your hand can't do a thing. You're just completely out of gas and you're completely drained. And it's over. Now, yes, maybe you can build yourself back up, but the problem is with Steel, they'll just keep knocking you back down. With Ruby, they'll just keep knocking you back down. The other colors, sure, the other colors you're going to have a just fine time. Well, let's talk about it. Emerald. Emerald's annoying, but you can ignore it. Yeah, they have guys that quest for a lot of lore, but you make a lot of weenies. And I think the only thing that Emerald has to spin stuff back is Mother Knows Best. They don't have anything. And Mother Gothel, they have to get up 6. By the time they get to 6 in that deck, you should be more than capable of already won the game. You should have a whole bunch chunk ton worth of lore. Sapphire. Sapphire is a ramp deck. That's the entire engine of Sapphire is ramp. If you see it ramped with Steel or with Ruby, you're pretty much done because these two will always kill you off. Any colors mixed with Ruby or Steel, you're going to have an uphill battle. You can win against the other colors just fine because you'll outpace them. You'll be able to outpace them. But when you're trying to deal with 2 colors that board control you extremely well, you're going to have a problem. So, right now I see that I think the game is kind of sitting in this mid-rangey area where like mid-range decks are probably the best decks because mid-range can deal with aggro. They can deal with control. And I think that's where people kind of are splitting right now is staying either at aggro or staying at control. And mid-range really just deals with it very, very nicely. There's a reason why it is kind of a triangle of, or a circle, whatever you want to call it, of like, we only have real 3 types. You have aggro, you have mid-range, and you have control. Each have their own abilities. Control just doesn't care for aggro. They'll just control the board, especially this deck. And mid-range will deal with this deck just fine. So, do be cautious of the fact that you are going to have an uphill battle if you play any deck that is including Ruby and any deck that is including Steel. Especially if they're playing such a big Steel package, which is they're going to be their heavy control package, and especially if you're playing any Ruby, where they're going to have a good chunk of Ruby control cards. But overall, this deck is really, really fun. I played a lot of it on Pixelborn, so I knew a lot of how it worked. What you want to do for your mulligans is you want a mulligan to see Stitch, Rockstar, and then the Lantern. By turn 3, you can have a Stitch out. You can tap the Lantern on your 3 ink, and you can Rockstar. And the next turn, you just go ham. Just summon out all your weenies all over the board, and then by turn 5, you'll be fine. You'll be swinging in for a whole lot of lore. Again, if you can see these Simbas to guard yourself and all of that, that's great. Now, again, I'm not sure if the updated version that I produced would have done any better. It might have. The problem is I still think that deck still had a lot of weenies in it, and still fell to the same problem. Where, yes, I don't think mine was as aggroed as this version is, but still. I think it still falls in the same problem, the fact that it definitely doesn't have a great matchup with like mid-range and control. You still don't have a great matchup against Steel, and you don't have a great matchup against Ruby. That's just the very truth of this deck. Ruby just has a board wipe that they can play at 7. So once they get to 7, you haven't won. They're just going to board wipe you and bring you back to 0. Not great because, again, they'll be at 7, so they could just play a bunch of things. So, nonetheless, this is a really, really fun deck. I know I didn't try out the updated version that was in my deck profile, but this is an updated version of it. This one is aggro. I may decide to bring in that version of the deck. Again, if you guys want to see that version, and I promise that version in the first Amber Amethyst Stitch profile, if you guys want to see that version of the deck, give this video 10 likes and I will do that. But Again, it has to hit the 10 likes because I have so many decks I want to give tries to. Amethyst Steel, I think that's a control variant deck. I like to try Amber Steel to get that a test. I like to give Sapphire Steel a test. Sapphire Ruby, Emerald Steel, Emerald Amber, Emerald Amethyst. There's just so many different combinations of decks I would really like to try. So again, 10 likes, and I promise the deck profile in the updated deck I discussed in that Stitch video, I will do a gameplay footage of it. Now, whether or not that will be for, of course, Mario, or I will just do a Pixelborn gameplay footage of it, that is for me to decide. Again, 10 likes on this video, and I will do that for you. Once again, I like to thank, of course, Mario from Super Lorcana World for, of course, inspiring me to actually try out this deck. This deck is a lot of fun. If you can get this off and you don't see your horrible matchups, or your opponent in Steel just happens to brick and they don't see the cards they need, then you're fine. Just go ham. You just have to understand in this deck, you can't go wide every minute. You kind of have to fall back on when to go wide, when not to go wide, especially with Ruby. You don't want to go wide right before they get to 7, because then they'll just board wipe you. You just went wide for nothing. Again, in this deck, if you start to burn out of gas, the other decks will just chew you up and spit you out. Once they know you're out of gas, it's over. Once you lose your Stitch Rockstar, you're out of gas. Once you lose like all your little weenies that you built this big board of, you're out of gas. Again, why I think like part of your world needs to kind of be in this deck so you can get this Rockstar out of your drop and not have to just hope that you draw Magic Brooms to cycle it back. I think multiple times I wish I really had this card in my hand. So yeah, overall, that is my thoughts on the deck. It didn't do as good as I thought it would, but again, I met my unfavorable matchups in all 3 rounds. Actually, no, it was 4 rounds because I got a bye, so I did win 1. But nonetheless, it was fun to play this deck. Thank you all for, of course, giving me the 10 likes to, of course, play another version of Amber Amethyst Stitch. So again, 10 likes, and I will do a gameplay footage of the original updated version of it, where it has, I think, like, be part of our world, and I think I'm playing Olaf's in there and other cards. Exactly not this deck. And give it a try and see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I want to give other decks tries, so do not worry. Other decks are coming along the way. Like I said, I think my next deck I'm going to give a try to is a Amethyst Steel deck I've been seeing floating around. A really interesting looking control variant deck. And of course, then I saw another Emerald Ruby evasive deck. The evasive deck was really cool, where it stole your lore from 𝐒𝐻 the Great. And that was a pretty neat gimmick of a deck. I just think I wanted to play more evasive. And I do still want to do Ruby Sapphire, and I want to do Sapphire Steel, because I think you can do Belle OTK out of Sapphire Steel. And I do want to do like princesses as well. So I mean, there's a lot of decks I want to try. I want to do like Musketeers mid-range. I want to do villains. Like, there's a lot of decks I want to try, and having these free tournaments from Mario is great time to try it. Not mentioning that I'm able to get, of course, gameplay footage from him so that I can, of course, bring it to you. So once again, 10 likes. I'll bring the updated Stitch Amber Amethyst deck in my first deck profile video for Amber Amethyst Stitch to a stream, or do Pixelborn, or do something for it. So yeah, so 10 likes and I will do that for you all. And comment down below your thoughts on Mario's deck. What did you think about it? What would you add? What would you change? Do you think part of your world actually needs to be a staple in this deck to deal with your unfavorable matchups? What other cards would you swap out, like Rafiki's, to deal with, swinging in and trying to clear a board? Would you change this to be more of like, instead of like to add the Snowball engine and more of control, play more of an Amethyst control engine in there? What are your thoughts on that? And all of that. And what other Stitch decks do you want me to try out? Do you want to try out Sapphire Stitch? I have a build for that. I think that's more like a mid-rangey deck. I'm gonna give a try to, is being like mid-rangey for Sapphire. Sapphire, do you want me to see me do the Emerald version? Do you want me to see me do the Steel version? Let me know all of that down in the comments. And while you're commenting all of that, do make sure to like the video, do make sure to subscribe to the channel, and do make sure to ring the bell so you get notified when my videos go live for you, and we'll see you here next time on Mama Dragon's TCG.